Hello, Star Wars CCG players, fans, and folks who just really didn't want to watch the late games for football today. Garrett Larson here, Dead Body on Slack and the forums and GEMP and everywhere else. Joined today with the newest advocate, Mike Kessling. How's it going today, Mike?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm on the right side of the ground and I get to talk about some Star Wars cards, so it could not be better.
Can't complain about that. I'm excited
Definitely
for
not.
this match.
This is going to be fun. We got Brian Fred versus Brad Kippel. This is the first of the top 8 matches going in. Brad is starting with Darkside. So, what are you expecting here from Brian? Like, I know you should have a some idea of what Brian's playing potentially.
I believe he's playing QMC again.
Okay.
Um, so we'll see what Brad brings. I know he thought it was very likely Brad could play ISB. Um, I think in the past, Brad has played a decent amount of walkers in the Atlanta meta. But really, Brad could play lots of decks. I think Brian's hoping if he's playing ISB that it's not the executor version, is what he told me, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and Brad is definitely one of those guys that can play any deck and play it very well. I was actually a little surprised, so I didn't get to stream Brian's last match against Sam, but I was impressed. Brian had, I think, a lot of guts going in with QMC against Sam, who's been playing that for kind of feels like years at this point, and certainly knows every trick that can go with it. So I thought that was a gutsy play by Brian, and it looked like it sounded like it worked out. Like I said, I kind of just had it streaming and listening to it as I was driving somewhere, so I didn't get to watch quite as close. Now we do see Brad on walkers. Um, this isn't really a terrible match for QMC. Like, you're going to lose your ancient watering hole, but walkers is going to struggle, I think, to do much in space. So they're going to be paying for their damage, and you're not going to be paying for yours.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this is a traditional Walker's build. So he's starting Code Clearance and Endor Shield.
Which right
Notably,
there
he does
says
not
it's
start Decree.
not a traditional walkers build. Like, code clearance in and of itself is already okay, this is not the build I was necessarily expecting. And he also doesn't have the helper effect that would let him fish Decree pretty quickly after he blew the shields. That's a bit of a surprise.
Well, it pulls Hoth cards, right? Isn't
Yeah,
Decree a Cloud City card?
I thought Decree was. I thought it pulled Decree.
I'm gonna look that
So
up.
maybe I'm.
Decree is a Cloud City card, and that card's called like something Barrage. No, that's the V card.
Yeah, I'm not.
Uh,
I just know it's the new Walkers card. I thought it could pull Decree for some reason. Maybe that's on me, and
yeah,
it's
I'm
it,
double checking.
perfect because I'm watching. Will you do that? Obviously, it starts pretty straightforward for Brian. Keeping and Belden's eye. He grabbed his grabber right away. Brad, as you heard, prepare for surface attack. You may start your landing. Code clearance and Endor Shield V. Used Endor Shield right away to go grab Ozzel. That's a little. This Walker deck's a little bit of a different start. I'm curious where Brad's going with it.
Yeah, he could have a lot of different options here. I mean, obviously with Code Clearance, we're going to expect he's got myriad for ability 3 Imperials for the forfeit bonus. That new helper effect does only pull Hoth cards. So
Okay.
typically when I was playing a bit of Walkers before Worlds, just for playtesting, I wouldn't start that effect against QMC and would just alternate start the regular decree. So depending on how quickly he can find Decree, I mean, I assume he's playing it.
Yeah, I think.
That'll be interesting because if Brian can pop off a turn or two with Watering Hole, he could get very ahead in the damage race because the Walker deck tends to be a little bit slow.
Yeah, Walkers is gonna. It does steady damage, but it doesn't necessarily do a ton. The code clearance start is interesting because I think it gives you a lot more legs against decks that want to come after the walkers quickly. because suddenly Veers has got like 8 forfeit and it allows you to stay alive a little bit longer. So Brad with a quick start though. I mean, he's got Blizzard 1, he's got Veers, he's got Target the Main Generator, and he's going to go after it. And I think will be a little bit of a 4-string staring match to an extent here.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Brian, outside of space, interacts with Brad much at all. So the real question will be how much can Brad come to disrupt or interact, if at all, with Brian?
I could see Brian mid to late game trying to take over the 5th and 7th markers. Like, especially the 7th, if you can get a guy in there, just because it'll be a steady drain and Brad's going to struggle to deal with guys on the ground if he can't stomp on him with trample. But I
Yeah,
think
if he
you're
has
right,
Jar Jar or something to get into the Wampa Cave.
which he should. I mean, Jar Jar is traditionally in these decks because he's got a species for Watering Hole. He's a solid little spy. Like, why not?
Yeah,
So,
I expect he has him.
yeah. But, Brian's got to find him at the right time and have the right backup because again, you don't want to be too risky just for one drain. You know, do your game plan, which is really just take over Cloud City and run the drains, especially if Brad doesn't get Decree out quickly. Like, that's going to be the killer.
Yeah, you see Brian come down as typical with Harksef and Overseer. Don't tread on me. I imagine we'll be pulling Ancient Watering Hole.
Watering Hole or Sand, but I would imagine Watering Hole is probably primary. That's the most important one, but he is probably running 2 Watering Holes.
Yeah.
So, depends on what's in there. Yep, there he grabbed Sand. So he may already have a Watering Hole in hand.
Or
So,
to your point, he has to, and he just knows he's more likely to find that. And sand likely means that Harken Overseer is safe enough in space.
yeah, because Brad's space is likely maybe a Maul and Simtar, a Marin the Decimator, and Brian says, I don't even want to play around in space. Here's Leia's Resistant Transport, who's going to go get him Ray right away, and he may have counted the Watering Holes and known he'd likely end up with one in used.
Or at worst, he can pull the tread on me back.
Yeah. So let's see where he goes with this. I mean, this is a solid first turn for Brian. This is the first turn you want for QMC. Like, he would have loved to see like a couple got Lobot and Yoxkit for the super quick flip, but I don't think that's super necessary, and he's perfectly happy doing it this way.
And he's got to be thrilled with the turn one Ray that he didn't have to pay two for.
Yeah, and again, that just locks out Bespin. Like, that plus Sand is going to be real hard for Brad to contest. All right, let me look at sound levels a little bit here. All right. I think I lowered your sound a little bit, Mike, so you're not going to be
I'm not booming.
quite as booming. I mean, you do have a naturally booming voice, so there's only so much we can do about that, but we'll try and mitigate it a little bit here. And Brad just starting out, pings for 1. He is going to pay 3 to drain for 1. You never feel good doing that, but I do think that's the right play here. Like, the easiest way to beat QMC is just get ahead of him. Force Brian to play from behind, force Brian to miss cards. And the 6th marker is not a card I expected to see particularly. And Brad is all in on making this shot right away. He's got the guns, he's got the rangefinder. Let's see if he throws a walker down at the 5th or 6th marker just to give himself an even more bonus.
I
Nope.
feel like paying to drain was almost an indicator that he didn't have another walker. and just wanted to do something with his force because he's probably only going to be drawing up to 14 and still have 4 or 5 in his force pile.
Yeah, and that could be. I think the drain, like I said, I'm never an advocate of pay 3 to drain for 1, but there are certainly times where I think it might be the right play, and I don't hate it here against QMC. Because if you do get Brian to top deck a couple key cards early, you can do real nasty things. So Brian's getting a bunch of activation off Hark's F as well right now. So he's just activating a ton.
Yeah, 16 on turn 2.
Well, I mean, he's getting 5 off Hark alone. Because all those non-battlegrounds floating in there.
Yeah.
So he'll lose a couple of those once the shield gets blown. And Brian also pays 3 to drain for 1. He's got a ton of force. I don't hate that play either.
I don't know why he wouldn't. I don't know. I don't love it. Given that he has a 6 card hand, maybe he has a few deploy free, or he should have some cheap characters. He did lose Ellers from hand, which tells me he must have plenty of characters in hand.
Yep. And there's Melas. The interesting thing with Ellers going and now Melas going to ground is it tells me he doesn't really think he's going to need the wild card full of smugglers up there. Because normally those would be 2 of the guys you really want on the wild card just to add to that total battle destiny. So, and Melas and Lisa aren't really your ideal guys to be thrown down there. They cost. Like, he would have really preferred to go cheap, but you take what you get sometimes. This gets him the flip. It gives him 7 cards to look through. And puts 3 species on table for once he gets Watering Hole out.
In their celebration. So that's about as quickly as Brian's likely to get that live, and he's got to be happy. I mean, I'm sure he's going to prioritize grabbing Masterful Move combo and hope that he can get a second copy of Celebration to stick,
Yeah.
assuming that Brad's got a canceller.
Hope Brad's only running 1 Masterful Move. And honestly, if I'm Brian, I think you got to move your guy. At the very least, you got to move them together. Like, I love the idea of, hey, let's just, race this, but, like, Brad could absolutely be running Vader plus Tarkin, and he's going to have 20 force to work with. And
But Brian probably has a path.
Probably.
Or a barrier. I mean, I don't think the Walker deck usually has a lot of space for like reactive canceling interrupts for things. Like he probably has a couple dark times in his deck. He may have a sense. I do think Brad sometimes plays sense in decks that people may not expect it from, but I'd be surprised if he has like blast door controls or something to cancel path of least resistance. So Brian's probably saying, I'm going as aggressive as I can. I want to push as much damage as quickly as I can and see if Brad's able to actually do anything to stop him.
Which does make sense, especially if you're considering that Brad's going to get Decree out soon, like, and really shut down a lot of your damage. So play it as aggressively as you can. And we see Sam in chat, who just subscribed with Prime for 66 straight months. That is a long time. And thank you very much for doing that. See if that helps my audio at all. And Brian plays the We're Doomed combo to shut down, save himself 1 damage, and Brad doesn't grab it.
Well, on the flip side, We're Doomed and Rebel Leadership become lost interrupts. So
Yeah.
maybe Brian's just thinking, hey, let's throw this out, save myself a force, maybe get Brad to grab this and just see if he'll fall for it, and Brad did not. So the good news for Brian is he should be able to find that again, probably on a turn where he's going to be losing 2 or more to the Walker damage. And I think this shot is almost a guaranteed hit with the Electro Rangefinder. Okay, so we know Decree, he now knows where Decree is, so 4 cards from the bottom.
Yeah.
But notably, that means like he can't force push for it this turn. He will likely be able to get it out next turn, depending on what else he does this, and if he can find a force push. But so far, this is going probably how Brian would expect and want.
I agree. This is All right. Not
Interesting.
expecting that.
Yeah, so I think Brad tends to play his own decks. So like most of the Walker decks nowadays, I have not seen playing their own system. The good news for Brian is obviously he has a good foothold at Bespin. Celebration is probably going to be live, barring a canceler from Brad. But with that said, Brad now won't be paying to drain. The wild card may be able to go fight that Dreadnought at some point, depending on how many smugglers he can get aboard. That
I
PF
mean,
forfeits for 9, though.
he's lost a lot of smugglers too. Like if you look
He'll
at
be
what
able to
he
start
just
retrieving
peeled
at
there,
least.
though, he
Yeah, what did
lost
he lose?
Chewie, he lost Dash, he
Rio.
lost Rio, he lost a Path, he lost a Don't Tread on Me. Like he's gonna. I don't necessarily think he'll struggle to remove Eli and the Dreadnought. Like the wild card with a ship or two, or with a smuggler or two, is gonna make that real interesting real quick. Din drawing two. I feel like Brad's probably running a commander two, which is going to make Din a lot less impactful. And Brian playing local defense, I'm assuming to grab the wild card we're talking about.
I would think so.
Yep.
And Sam pointed out in chat about the We're Doomed also that if Brad doesn't grab it, Brian will just be able to loop it potentially with Celebration.
And that would be my biggest concern is you play it, it's lost. Yeah, you're going to get drained a little bit, but if you can celebrate it back, that's real bad for Brad. Like that means basically every other turn you might not be doing anything. And Brian's going to keeping for a card before he drains for 3. I gotta imagine he's looking for pilots. You gotta go after space. You can't go on the ground. You go after him in space. You force him to probably shuttle Merrick Steele up at some point and just try and grind and stay ahead. So,
Yeah, I mean, to your point, he lost multiples. He's lost Elors, Rio, and Chewie.
and Dash. He's lost 4
And Dash.
smugglers. That's he's probably got Solo left. Um, I'm not sure who else because Malos is on the ground. Like, there's only so many smugglers in the game. This is
Yeah, and with the We're Doomed looping, I mean, Brian's going to have to be at 3 to 4 battlegrounds to be able to actually reliably retrieve that.
yeah. So if Brian does get a full spread out though, where he's at 3 or 4 battlegrounds plus he's got Figrin going, that's gonna be he'll be perfectly fine. But honestly, if he's got 4 battlegrounds plus Figrin, I don't think there's any way he loses the game either way. Like, oh, I can loop We're Doomed to cancel 2 damage, which really just cancels 1 because it's still a lost interrupt, so you're still losing a card. Or you can just lose 2 and retrieve them. Like, it doesn't feel nearly as impactful.
That's fair. Brian guesses correctly with Lisa and hits a Dark Time off the top. And here we do see the wild card.
And are we going to see a barrier from Brad? Is Brad playing barriers? And there's the solo. So he's adding 1 to his total. I mean, now he's got 4 species. If he can get Watering Hole and 1 more. And there's Din, so he's going to force out the command. Assuming Brad has it.
Yeah, Brad goes to exchange a card from hand to swap Not Within Sight and Reach, which to me says maybe he doesn't have a command in hand and he's just hoping that was the bottom card of his deck.
Yeah. Or like this. So now he's going and searching with Piet to get Mahdi and also shuffle that 5
Yeah, that's possible.
around. So, and Brian, Din, and Calfal on the wild card. So he's drawing 2 Destiny now if Brad doesn't have the command. And the total will be +1 from solo. And Brad also targets Piet using Din, so he's going to retrieve 1. There's Ketwall, another smuggler. And Yaks hit, so 3 and 3 says Piet dies. Like Piet forfeits for 9, as you correctly pointed out. Well, 1 is definitely not what he wanted to draw there. So Piet's going to cover, but where are you going to move that Dreadnought that's not going to be bad?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, he's probably going to end up shuttling up Merrick Steele. And sorry, I lost audio for a minute. My headphone died. But it's going to be a game of cat and mouse to keep that alive for Brad.
And like he might actually need to shuttle up Merrick Steele and Ozzel and just count on Trample being able to keep Brian from being able to effectively battle Blizzard 1. But none of that's good for him. I mean, he does have 10 cards in hand. Maybe he's got something going on, but... I mean, Dan, a 10-card hand is a little scary, but at the same time, like, what are you really scared of if you're Brian? Like, is Brad going to drop 3 pilots on the Dreadnought in battle? Okay. Like, what else is he doing with that 10-card hand? We see Brian lose a path off reserve and a path from hand. So...
I think he's just counting on if he needs to use it, he has solo.
He landed a... How did you land a Dreadnought, Tommy? Capital ships don't land unless they move like a starfighter. Alright. So Brad uses his objective and retrieves prepared defenses into hand so he can add 1 to a Battle Destiny, which isn't bad. And yeah, you've got Solo who can path as well, but I guess you kind of count on that and go, alright, well, if we need it. And Brad goes for the... Brad's going for the spread. There's Mithra Nudo, which Brad kind of telegraphed that he had with the just dumping, not with the Insider Reach. And Tarkin, so he's getting 2 Battle Destinies, Battle Deployment, which is fine. I guess both players right now are going to be power -2, so okay.
And not super relevant. I guess it will allow him potentially to pull another vehicle on the Voth.
Yeah, I mean, how many more vehicles is he really running?
So like Blizzard 2, Mark 1 and Blizzard 6.
Yeah, could be he's just going real heavy into the spread of vehicles instead of doing the, like, 3 Blizzard 4s and just go for ping damage and that's it. More of a traditional build than, like, the Tom style build that's been running around quite a bit. And Brad doesn't battle. Brad just drops the 2 guys there and draws a couple and calls it a day. That's a little surprising. I mean, I guess he's just willing to say this will protect this drain of 2, but like you're gonna just start peeling guys to keep it going here. So
yeah, I don't think it would have been a very profitable battle for Brad. I think his best bet is to just try and stay alive in space. He's blocking the drain of 2, and he'll just keep trying to funnel guys onto that and stay alive as long as he can.
Yeah, and I think the main kind of concern, for lack of a better term, is if Brian starts tracking a good Destiny battle, sand, effectively drop Brad to no battle Destiny, he's getting the +1, and there went Decree off used pile. That is not good for Brad. I mean, we haven't seen Watering Hole yet, but it's coming out at some point.
That was also a non-virtual Walker Garrison that he just lost.
That doesn't shock me. Like, with him running a bunch of Walkers like this, that makes a lot of sense.
I don't hate it. Obviously, if Brian's able to find Menace Fades, that card turns off. But hitting that Decree could end up being huge, because if Brian can get Watering Hole online this turn, he's now draining for 6 instead of 3.
And he hits Lisub again, this time killing the artillery, so Brad loses the direct damage of the artillery plus the trackable 7, which is not what he wanted. We see Brian put down the incinerator, which is really just a generic "you can't drain me here" site. There is Jar Jar to the 7th marker, like we talked about. That's the spot that Brad's going to struggle, I think, to contest. And Leia Rebel Princess to cancel a couple drains. That's a solid start. Yeah, Dan, I mean, Watering Hole would be huge here if Brian could get it. But honestly, Brian's in a pretty good spot right now.
All it would do is push the game. It would accelerate the speed of the game, but it's not like he's in bad shape without it. It would just make things very dire for Brad.
Yeah, like Brad's got 16 cards down and 8 in hand, so he's got a total of 24. Brian's got a total of 25 because he's got 21 down and 3 in hand. But Brian's threatening a lot more damage, and Brian's also threatening 4 retrieval a turn. So Brad is doing make that 5 retrieval a turn as Brian shuttles Ray down to the docking bay. So, like, Brad's doing, this turn Brad will do 3 damage. So I'm assuming we'll just see Leia cancel both drains. And even after that, he's going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage, and Brian's theoretically retrieving 5 of it. Like, the math on that does not work well. Although I could definitely see Brian accepting this drain of 1 and just canceling the drain of 2 twice. Oh, no.
I think in a non-match play situation, I might do that. Here, I want to make sure I'm getting cards back with Leia.
Yeah. I think either one is acceptable enough. Like, I don't think either way is necessarily bad. I might have said maximize your Leia value, even with it being match play. So, but not terrible. And we see the Walker Garrett Brad retrieving Walker Garrison V. The objective retrieves the bottom card of Lost Pile into hand. So that Garrison V will get him. It'll cancel a force drain at a site because he's got an AT-AT at a related battleground. So he's going to cancel that drain at the 7th marker, which is good. And there's a 3 force loss, and Brian's just peeling the 2 he retrieved with Leia, and then 1 more. Losing Chewie, I don't think makes him super sad, just because it takes a 1 off his deck if Brad does have a way to battle him.
Yeah, we know Brad has Mark 1 and Blizzard 6 in hand. The question is, will he commit that to Hoth to amp up more damage, or will he potentially put it in front of Ray?
And I'll be honest, I don't really like either one of those plays. Like, putting it at Hoth to just add another damage is probably preferable. Putting it in front of Ray just feels like something bad's going to happen. So, granted, most of Brian's attack forces are already sort of aligned. Like, Chewie's not on table. Chewie's dead. We're not seeing a lot of the other stuff. Din's up in space at Hoth. Like, where else is he going to go with it? But I'd still be scared to go down. Well, Brad is a braver man than I as he drops Blizzard 2 to Cloud City for 7. I don't know where. So. And we see the battle in space.
If I'm Brian, I'm actually kind of excited to get to use sand because it's getting me a life force back.
Yeah, no, you're happy to use sand, and now I think Brad's going to be. Brad can't even fly over and defend Blizzard 2. I think he might have miscounted on Blizzard 2 costing 7 instead of 6. Because Blizzard 2 is just sitting there alone against Ray. Unless he knows what that other destiny is and is planning to trample Ray. Oof. So Brian does not get the Kelfel cancel. And
Gotta imagine he's gonna forfeit solo.
Yeah, I'm just trying. Where did he add 3 to attrition? What am I?
The objective
Oh, yeah.
as for each Imperial leader in battle, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
attrition against
Plus
opponent is
1.
+1 for each Imperial leader in battle. So no,
Yep.
so his attrition is +3 currently.
Yeah, so then that's a great battle for Brad, and Brad being immune is also great for him. And yeah, I expect you got to lose solo here. Or
Or
losing Din and Calfel?
interesting. He's obviously putting a lot of value in the ability to play an interrupt from Lost Pile.
Yeah. And we see the trample. So, and that makes sense. Brad knows what that destiny is. There's his 7. So,
And he has the rescue of the
oh,
gods.
that's unfortunate.
And
I
so
mean, for Brad.
Brian should now be able to lease of that 7 away. Or the trample, we'll see. But he's almost guaranteed a lease of damage as well this turn.
Yeah. Lisa, you just lease up the.
All his drains, except for the Wampa Cave, which we expect to be canceled, are drains of 1. So as
Yeah.
soon as if Brad loses from the top, he can then lease up and get the 7.
Okay, so yeah, Brad's trusting. I wonder if Brad's sitting on another trample right here, because if you lease up the trample off, then you hit the 7. You give him the 7 for that second shot at Ray. And Brad
We'll
does not, because Brad just used Merrick Steel to search. So
interesting.
Brad said, I don't want to give up the immediate lease up damage, which makes sense. Like, you both know it's an interrupt on top, but it also means he doesn't have the trample to kill Ray, and that may not end particularly well for him.
I mean, it's unlikely the Blizzard 2 is going to take overflow, but it's likely Brian will be able to clear it.
I mean, Brian just needs to clear a total of 12 to start causing overflow, and Ray alone is 5, plus a destiny. So he only needs another character or 2 before Blizzard 2 is legitimately looking at overflow.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if it's worth committing resources to that versus just trying to get more guys on the wild card.
Yeah, and that's going to be the question, I think, is do you just move the wild card away and say, fine, you have the Hoth train. Between Celebration and all my stuff going on, I'm just not that concerned about that drain of 1.
I think he's more likely to move the transport over than he is to abandon the Hoth system, because I don't think he wants to take any unnecessary damage.
And I don't disagree with you that might be the play he makes. I feel like, especially in match play where winning is more important than, like, getting the win is more important than anything else, first and foremost. If you move Leia's Resistance Transport over and Brad battles, he's drawing at a +4 again, or +3 at minimum. So you're probably losing solo at that point. And then you're likely going to have to abandon it anyways. So it might be smarter just to abandon it ahead of time. If that makes sense.
I think it depends if you can get another guy or 2 up there.
And that, I think, is the question, is do you do another guy or 2 on the wild card? Do you use them instead to try and overflow Blizzard 2? Do you find your other watering hole? Because really, that's kind of the killer right now. Like, Brian doesn't have his watering hole going. This would be over already if he had watering hole going. So, but I mean, Brad's down to 12 cards down and 6 in hand, so he's only got 18 cards total, and Brian's got 29. Like, that Cloud City Celebration for 4 plus Figurin is just, it's racking up real quick.
I wouldn't be shocked if Brad draws up, but we'll
And
see.
there's the Menace Fades to shut down the Walker Garrison if Brad gets it. And honestly, you might be right. Brad could just say, all right, I'm going to do my damage. Brian does not have anyone else in hand. So he's just going to battle Blizzard 2 and draw high enough to kill it. Yep, there's a total of 6, so Blizzard 2 goes away. No overflow, you're fine. Um, Carl says, this is why I play effective repairs. Honestly, Brian might have just said, I don't think I need the watering hole. Like, watering hole is valuable in that sense, but like, there have been so many other valuable cards that it might just not have been that big a deal. And he draws a few. He's leaving 21 down, though. Like, Brad's going to feel real bad drawing up after doing just 1, 2, 5 damage that Brian probably loses most of from his hand. And Brad's not drawing up. And there's the Weird Doomed.
Brian has the We're Doomed again. And so notably, he moved Tarkseer and Overseer over, which means he's got to have a barrier in hand.
Yep.
And we did see Brad lose Marajade and Ship earlier, so it's possible he's just putting Brad on. You don't have another ship, and if you do, I'll barrier it. But he's reinforced at Hoth and isn't going to take any more damage there. Plus, also, the ability to shut off the 3 from the ping is pretty big this turn.
Yeah, and moving Hark and the Overseer is better than the Transport simply because it gives him more forfeit up there as well. Like, if another battle goes the wrong way, Hark plus the Overseer's forfeits for 9. So you can keep Solo up there for one more turn.
Yeah, good point.
So, and Brad does a little bit of damage, but really not much between Menace Fades and We're Doomed. And the fact now that We're Doomed, Brian is retrieving enough, he'll get that We're Doomed back. Like, Brad... There's another Walker. Okay. I guess. Put Marquand on it.
Doesn't really do anything.
It'll give him 1 more damage next turn. And there's the battle.
But it's also notably a card down, and then if Brian's able to just play the We're Doomed again, it doesn't do anything.
I don't think Brian will be able to play the We're Doomed again.
It'll be 2 turns from now if that happens, but he will likely get it back.
Oh, he'll get it back this turn either way. It's just he won't have enough to play it a second time. And there's that Cara Dune. Oh, that's just Destiny of Total Power. So Brian's fine with that. He grabbed the other card off Sand. There's a 5, which is going to turn into an 8 in attrition. So Brian needs to draw high enough to kill one of those guys. Alright. That'll take one of the leaders out, which is good for Brian. There are Mahdi, who's, it's fine. He doesn't matter. I think I'd probably lose Solo here. Like, at this point, you don't
he's
need
got to cover
Solo.
8, right?
Yeah, he's got to cover 8, so it's either Solo or Hark and the Overseer. Oh, Solo's 7, never mind. So, for some reason, I always think Solo's 8. Yeah, Solo's 7, so it's Hark and the Overseer.
Well, if Watering Hole was online, I think all his guys would be forfeit +1, but that is not the case.
And honestly, like I said, I just don't think he needs Watering Hole. Like, Brian's turn, he's going to drain for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and retrieve 5. Like, Brad will get another turn of damage in, but, like, he'll get at most 6 damage in. I guess maybe 7, because I think now Brian has to run away from Hoth. Unless he wants to pile some pilots on there. Like, now that Sand is burnt, I don't think you want to stay up there battling against Brad, drawing 2 and then adding 2 to it. So,
I'd be surprised if he doesn't abandon ship, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, he's leaving 2 Destiny. Oh, yeah, with Hark, he can no longer activate his entire everything. So, Well, let's see, and he'll hit Lee sub. Well, does he know what's there for Lee sub? I don't think he does. So there goes the Tarkin's Bounty from hand that Brad retrieved and has no need to play because Leia's already been used twice. And Brian might be thinking, because I'm not sure what the top card is. I think the second card off the top is the Enforcement. So let's see what Brian is going with Lee sub. He is going with Effect. So we'll see if I tracked poorly or not. Well, it was Commander Igar, so I was right. It wasn't the Enforcement. We'll call that a win because I don't really try and track decks much when I'm commentating. And there goes Igar and Tempest 1 from hand. So Brad's done going to ground. Like, and that might have been what he would have liked to put at Cloud City instead of just that empty Blizzard.
There's the Enforcement.
Yep. So it was one card down, like I said. I'm calling that a win. There's Callus from hand. There's another ability 3 Imperial who forfeits for 9 and actually gets you a card draw when you play him. So he's a solid Imperial in this type of a deck. There goes Cold Feet. Brad's going to be down to 11 cards total. 7 down, 4 in hand. Brian's grabbing a card with Keeping, and he's going to have 18 down plus 8 in hand. Like, Brian's winning this game. Now it's just a question of differential, and I think at this point, if you're Brad, you are just activating, do your damage, and draw. You don't have a way to stop the retrieval, and that 5 retrieval is just... that's nuts.
Brian, in general, my sense of watching him play this deck is he needs to work a little bit on his sequencing, because he's used a lot of force before in various turns before searching with his effects for his force pile. One turn he played everything but 3 cards in his force pile before drawing a card with Ray. Like, things that he should just be doing before he starts planning out exactly what he's going to do in his turn. That would be my notes for him post game.
Yeah, and I would say those are valid. Like, QMC has so many moving parts that sequencing everything perfectly is a real struggle. And it's definitely a deck that if you play it poorly or you misplay something can end up real bad. I don't really
that was
understand
nice. So he
that.
retrieved the escape pod and then used computer interface to pull it back in.
Okay,
so
that
he
was...
won't be taking 4 damage this turn.
All right, that I was like, why are you drawing the top card he used? I wasn't watching what he retrieved, so that would be... And there's Luke, just as forfeit fodder. I like that play a lot. Like, now you don't have to abandon Hoth.
And these were cards in his hand that weren't there, especially now that he won't be losing to the... He's just going to lose 2 cards from his hand on his turn, and then this game's over.
Yeah. So don't draw anything else, Brian. There's nothing. Yeah, now that Watering Holes hit the table, it went from a little bit over to this is dunzo. Like, Brad's just gonna... Brad plays not within sight or reach. Okay. I'm not entirely sure why. Like, you're certainly not going to try and activate and battle off that 7. Like, there's no need to give Brian a bunch more retrieval.
Well, that's interesting. He didn't activate everything, so Brian is going to get another turn.
And then he grabs the Weird Doomed, which makes sense, like, but I'm confused. Confused with the play, confused with the... In a match play format, saying I will let my opponent retrieve 5 seems suboptimal, to phrase it nicely. I'm not sure what. Of course, Brian now. Well, I guess Brian's losing off reserve just to keep 3 for the threat of limited resources. But we haven't seen it yet. But anyone who's listened to me commentate any match play, I advocate for that card basically being in 100% of match play dark sides. Just because 4/4s can be such a swing no matter what. So now we're battling. He's going to draw 2, like, fine. I mean, your best case scenario is draw high enough to kill Solo and Luke, and that's just not that impactful. So he's got 9, 10, 11 in attrition, which is Luke and Ketwall, honestly.
Yep.
Like, there's no reason to lose Solo yet. And the Destiny coming back. Well, Brad's looking at... Is Brad thinking of playing that prepared defenses he's got to add 1? Which would make it a 12 and make it immaterial. Because Ketwall and Luke is still a forfeit of 12. And...
Here she is again.
Ryan is going to hate that Cara Dune, and it adds 4. He gets added 2 to the Battle Destiny with Wildcard, but still doesn't crack the immunity. So, Ryan just... Alright, he chooses instead to lose Solo and Ketwall. That just shut off Watering Hole. That was a huge mistake.
That was a mistake by Brian. Yeah.
That was actually real big in a match play format, because now he can't drain him out. If he leaves Solo on table, he's got Watering Hole in effect.
And he's got plenty.
And
plenty of drains. But now he
got the drains.
That's big.
Because, yeah, now he's going to drain for 7, and Brad's got 12 cards left. So Brian's going to eat at least 6 force loss he doesn't need to lose because of a mistake. Like, that's all that was. That was just a glaringly... That was a misplay. And like you talked about, that's something Brian needs to tighten up. He's a better player than that mistake says. So we'll see what he gets here. So he gets his interrupt with Lee-Sub and does hit the net with Insider Reach. So he's getting the extra card with Lee-Sub, which is good, but yeah,
It also shut out Figrin. So it's a retrieval and...
Oh, yeah. So it cost him a retrieval as well, along with the ability to end the game this turn. That was a big mistake by Brian. I mean, it's just going to impact differential. And Brian is winning by a bunch, so in the grand scheme of things, it could certainly be worse, but...
You see Brian in chat say, "Man, I am bad." I mean, yeah, he now realizes, oh gosh, I messed up.
Yep, and I think he realized as soon as he was like, "Why didn't that be a drain of 3?" Oh man, and yeah, that's... Brad was running 3 copies of the Thrawn Puller, it looks like, or no, 2. Never mind, because he didn't draw one for Destiny. He drew the Force Push. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, I think Brian's got to... I think you got to move the wild card away.
But why? He's going to do 5 damage on the next turn, so he can just spark Luke there.
Well, it's more Luke plus the wild card. He's only got 1 power there. Well, he's got 14 in forfeit, but, like...
I wasn't looking at his power in my mind.
I mean,
just fine.
Yeah, he's got 14 in forfeit. You're probably okay. I might actually move Leia's transport over and just fine if he cancels celebration. If Brad moves over and cancels celebration, you don't care. He's only got 5 cards left. You're doing more than 5 damage. I
He
mean,
could swap his ships too. I imagine Brian has Hujix in his hand.
yeah, that would be the other card. So, and Brian's probably right now just tanking a little bit because he's annoyed at himself for losing solo and seeing what he wants to do here to finish up this game. So we'll see where he goes with this. I'd be a lot more comfortable with wildcard if you put at least one guy on it, unless you are sitting in the Hujix. So Brian's only got 3 cards in hand though. Like he can go get
Brad
whatever.
did hang on to a card in hand, so maybe you're right about limited resources.
That's just one of those cards, like I said, in match play where you're like, look, 4 differential is big. Like being able to late game just be like, oh well, turn a close game into even way closer, or even turn the tide of a game that you otherwise might be losing by a couple, can be real big. Like it's match play, so differential matters, but you still need the win. So, and I think Brad probably, I think this deck plays better against QMC than we saw this match. I think Brad made a mistake in not starting Decree and instead starting Code Clearance. But Brian got a pretty fantastic start.
But as it turned out, Brian didn't have a single drain with a 4 drain bonus.
Yeah, Brian never used Watering Hole. But I think Brad was playing around the Watering Hole is going to come out eventually. Yeah, I think, I mean, chat we see is Brian Fred going to win this. Absent something absolutely insane happening, yes, Brian Fred is going to win this game. They're playing the second game in about 2.5 hours from now. The second game is going to be played at, I believe, or 3.5 hours, 8 Eastern. No, 2.5 hours.
I need to do something.
Yeah, I mean, Brian did say he was having internet issues earlier. So hopefully it's not something completely. Oh, there, he's grabbing a card with keeping. So yeah, I think he was just hard tanking for a minute and going, all right, I did something real dumb. How do I get out of this? So, and he might have had the internet slogging for a minute there. But let's see what he grabs. I think if he doesn't do anything with Luke in the wild card, it says he's either grabbed the Hujix or he's got it in hand. Because that's really the only spot he's vulnerable in any way. I mean, Brad's got 4 cards down and 1 in hand. There is nothing Brad can attack with. I mean, Tommy, you might want to wait on the popcorn a little bit. Like maybe get it out of the box, but don't start the microwave yet. Because you do have a couple hours before the next game. And I think Dan and I are going to be streaming the game 2 of this match together, like I said, at I think it was 8 o'clock Eastern, so 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Western, and sometime between now and Tuesday West Coast time. So Brian's, I'm not sure what all Brian's doing here.
I'm not sure Brian knows what he's doing here, to be fair.
Looking in your
I think
reserve
he's trying to
deck
make sure he doesn't make any catastrophic mistake again.
Yeah, and maybe because like, what are you looking for in your reserve deck? Your docking bay is in play. You shouldn't be starting a battle anywhere. You should just be, throw a guy on the wild card, sit on the Hujix, and just be like, all right, well, I'm gonna lose. I'll lose 6, and that's it. And I think at that point it's probably might just be peel 6 off the top. Like you've got 24 cards down. So even if you peel all 6 straight off the top before Brad draws up, you're still winning by 18, which is very big in match play.
Yeah,
like this is
he
going to
would
be
have been
a
like
big
26 win. Had he not messed up.
Yeah, this is going to be a big win either way, but it could have been almost insurmountable. Instead, it's just a very big win that Brad is absolutely a good enough player that you have to be worried about it. You can't just be like, well, I won by 18. This match is locked up. You know.
Brad played 0 hour in the round of 16, I think, and Brian played My Kind of Scum. So it'd be interesting if they have the same decks or different decks.
Yeah, I mean, Brian plays Rio, which I don't hate, and all right, put a card down, activate two. I don't know what your end goal is there though. Like again, you're not starting a battle, so
If he has the Hujix, he can swap his ships. I don't know. Who knows what he's thinking.
yeah. And there he just says, okay, we're good. I think that might have just been a
Watering Hole is now back online, at least.
yeah. Which now that it doesn't matter, that might have been just a either I don't have the Hujix or I just don't want to risk it.
Yeah, I assume we're just going to see Brad drain, damage, draw.
Yeah, and the fact that Brad hasn't already dropped the limited says that wasn't the last card in hand, and Brian loses the Hujix from hand because Brad leaves no force to draw, so he can't get overflowed. So Brian's going to win this by, looks like 21, unless something crazy happens. Because there's no, I mean, the other card Brad could have would be like an artillery, but you're not going to play that. Yep, there we go, Brad. Brad draws everything up. So Brian by 21, 14, and 28 in lost.
Yeah.
So well played by Brian. I mean, it wasn't, as you said, there was certainly some sequencing issues he could tighten up on, and hopefully he does that before the next round, but hopefully not before the Ohio Mega Weekend that you and I are going to, because, I'd prefer Brian to be beatable then. Like, it's just between us. Like, I think Brian is, there's Brad. Ironically, the last card was the Masterful Move combo he'd been hunting for quite a while. So, that being said,
for some reason, Brian has this bug where he can't see the chat. So, he probably didn't see Brad telling him that.
That could be. Yeah, Brian, chat's been like that for a few people I've heard. So,
Same.
I don't...
Yeah, I was at first just making that it was user error if it's just Brian, but once it was reported by others, I was like, oh, okay, this seems like a real thing.
Yeah, user error with Brian would be a reasonable assumption, so we can see where that is. But thank you very much for joining me here, Mike. This was a blast.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you this weekend. I mean, we'll
see you on Friday in Ohio.
For sure. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I will chat with everybody later today when Dan and I bring y'all game 2. So have a great night.